Donald Trump is heading back to the White House.
Together we can truly make America great again.
We are in for an unpredictable but fascinating 4 years.
And we're going to be following every twist and turn for the first 100 days. We'll be bringing you the latest updates and analysis first thing every morning. So join me, James Matthews.
Me, Martha Kelnick.
And me, Mark Stone.
For Trump 100, every weekday at 6 a.m, wherever you get your podcasts.
Hello, good morning, and welcome to the final edition for this week of the podcast that gives you everything you need to know about the day ahead in British politics in under 20 minutes. And if you've been feeling like you've been having too much politics over the last few days, don't worry. Just one more week till a decently long recess break that the government has scheduled in for MPs starting next Thursday. So lucky them.
Lucky them indeed, and it always provokes arguments about whether they're really on holiday or working. And as a gesture of transparency, we're going to say right now that week, apart from the Monday, we are going to be on holiday. Definitely holiday.
We will be on holiday. Definitely holiday.
Not working from home. We will not be serving our listeners like properly on holiday trotters up. It's Thursday, February the 6th, and my name's Anne McElvoy, Executive Editor of Politico. With me, Sam Coates of Sky News.
I feel like there's been one big theme this week, Anne, and it's across some of the papers' front pages this morning, and that is global leaders coming to terms with the pronouncements of Donald Trump. And this is what 2025 is going to feel like. You know, first tariffs, then Gaza. One thing caught my eye overnight. Keir Starmer's actually been talking to the outgoing Canadian Prime Minister Justin Trudeau, who I suppose is arguably the first global political casualty of Donald Trump. He's on his way out. Now, I suspect that in reality, that phone call was a little bit of a therapy session between leaders who are having to handle these kind of evolving extreme statements coming out of the White House while holding their domestic kind of population sort of revulsion at some of the stuff that's being said at bay. It's a really hard act to do. But actually, I totally loved the poker face prose of the Downing Street readout. So that said, Sir Keir told Mr. Trudeau that he welcomed an international conversation on the importance of trade and collaboration. Yeah, yeah, right. Peerless official language. Now, on the subject of tariffs and how to handle this kind of sort of massive asteroid that's hit the global economy from the White House, you've been talking to somebody who knows all about this field. Sort of one of the one of the foremost experts in the world, Treasury Secretary in the Clinton era, Larry Summers, about all of this for your Politico podcast. And really, I just want to know one thing. What advice does he give to the UK when it comes to dealing with Trump and tariffs? Is he on the side of suck up to Trump and do deals, or is he on the side of like, you've just got to hold your ground because he's a bully and don't give in?
Yeah, he was really interesting on this. He's a very outspoken opponent of tariffs, but he did accept that there was a diplomatic dance to be conducted here, as Peter Mandelson heads as ambassador to Washington. However, he said he would be very careful of any country, he said, talking about diplomatic there, Sam, he really meant us, seeking to curry favour on a one-off basis. And those gains could be ephemeral, they could be temporary. And he had this warning, which was interesting, that it could alienate the remainder of the community of nations, the other countries who are being subject to attack. In other words, if you push it too far, sucking up to Donald Trump, you could end up on the naughty step with a lot of your allies. So have a listen to Power Play from Politico for that and what he makes of that.
It's interesting because we've had lots of heavy hints that we could do some kind of deal between the UK and the US. We've talked about it this week. Is Britain going to be the outlier? Is Britain and Keir Starmer going to be the golden child for Donald Trump? Is that a wise position for Keir Starmer to end up being in, given, as you say, the potential tensions that could mean elsewhere? That is the sort of global political question for 2025. Anyway, it's a day of announcements. Keir Starmer is doing one on more tweaks to build more nuclear reactors. Kemi Badenoch is doing one on immigration, changing from 5 to 10 years, the amount of time before foreign nationals must have lived in the UK before they can apply for indefinite leave to remain. Let's just trot through both of those. On nuclear reactors, Anne, is this going to make any difference at all, or is this just politics?
Well, I think it will make a difference if Keir Starmer gets what he wants. I think he's pushing very hard now on nuclear. For me, it's the strongest signal that we've seen there to create energy security. Build, baby, build agenda. Nuclear, build, baby, build on energy infrastructure. And that would mean changes to planning rules to create more mini nuclear power plants, like small modular reactors, if you want the jargon, for the first time. And that's been very restricted, and it'd be interesting how much opposition that there then turns out to be, and how much the Prime Minister and Ed Miliband, who's arguing in a piece that he's written today, that this will also bring down bills. Now, there's a degree of scepticism about that, I should say. I was talking to a senior Mandarin who dealt with the Sizewell B extension a couple of years ago. He was pointing out that this is really better for delivering energy security than being able to guarantee when you can bring down bills. So I think the government has a couple of messages there. And so sometimes it sort of depends who's fronting it, which one they focus on.
Yeah, the government is in a mess on this promise before the election to bring down bills by £300. When it was made, prices were higher. Prices have bounced around a bit. There isn't the scope to bring them down at the moment, and people can't see how it would happen without a huge additional burden on the taxpayer, and Rachel Reeves doesn't have the money. So they feel a bit stuck on that. What's interesting about it is about this whole nuclear reactor sort of proposal is that in effect there are almost sort of two arms to it. Keir Starmer acknowledges that there's sort of 8 sites for nuclear reactors, that sort of traditional nuclear reactors, and there have been lots of blockages. You talk about Sizewell. It's been a decade to sort of plough through the objections of local communities and satisfying all of the kind of local regulation and nature regulations and all of that. It is very, very, very hard, and some would say rightly so, to build a nuclear reactor. It takes a long time, but there are 8 sites where the government has said you can build them, and this proposal would mean that the government doesn't have to designate a site. You can do it in far more places. But it strikes me that it is a pretty good goal simply to build the 8, right? But Keir Starmer has done what quite a lot of other prime ministers have done recently, and suddenly seized also upon this shiny new technology, and you should look out for it, of small modular reactors. So quite a lot of the papers write, if I'm being honest, pretty breathlessly about small nuclear. I mean, they sound like kind of nuclear reactor vans that drive around the streets providing power. But the bottom line, Anne, is these things don't bloody exist.
Exactly.
They don't exist. Prime ministers from Boris Johnson onwards write about small modular reactors. It sounds cool. We can have hundreds of them dotted around the country. This technology does not exist. And all he is saying is, do you think people like Google could come up with a solution? This is fantasy announcement-based politics, not serious politics when you talk about small modular reactors and sort of make them sound like they're potentially real and a solution to Britain's energy costs, an energy problem that is in any way a near-term solution to stuff. Britain has a real near-term energy problem, some of the highest bills in Europe. The price cap for energy bills is going up. That's the problem. In April, I think it's going to go up to around £1,800. Currently, it's £1,738. In January last year, it was sort of, in April last year, it was like 1,690. So bills are going up, pain is going up. Talking about fantasy small nuclear reactors isn't going to solve any problem. You
might be being a bit harsh on the fantasy bit of that. I think some aspects of nuclear. Now Sam and I are going to do nuclear technology far too early in the morning. Some things could come on stream, at least the potential, a bit quicker. But it's interesting, Sam, isn't it? But what you've just said reminds me a bit about the debate about expanding airports as a way to push growth. It's as if when the government is faced with something very pressing in the moment, energy costs, the lack of growth, they punt out answers which are going to be way, way down the line, and where we know that there are going to be lots of objections and difficulties getting there. So it reminds me a bit of that. Do you remember that Monty Python sketch? When will it be, this wind that is so mighty? And the answer is always, well, we're waiting for actually the end of the world, which we're not hoping for. But it does feel a bit like that, that the answers are always very far in the future.
I was talking to a member of the nuclear industry very senior figure in the nuclear industry in the last 24 hours who was just saying, look, do not count on that technology anytime soon. Those things are not happening. We just have to get on with the hard yards of doing the big ones. And they may be self-serving in saying that, but the technological cases that they ran through about the bits of a small nuclear reactor that don't exist yet and haven't been worked out, the list was very long.
Oh, pessimist.
I sat through. Anyway, just tell us a bit about Kemi Badenoch and immigration. The proposal will also see this novel idea in British immigration law that you're going to, if you're going to apply, if you're a foreign national, you're going to apply for indefinite leave to remain, path to citizenship, you're going to have to prove that you are that Britain's a net beneficiary from you being in the country. In other words, quite how this works, I don't know, but you're going to have to show that any costs of benefits, presumably including tax credits, social housing, possibly schooling for your children, if you add up all of that, you have to show that you contribute to the state more than the amount that Britain has provided for you. So if you're in any way a sort of net cost on the UK, you are not allowed to stay. What do you think? Is this all politics, or is this a direction that you can see UK policy actually going in for real and being implemented in the hypothetical situation that Kemi Badenoch is Prime Minister?
Well, indeed. Well, it doesn't take an advanced accountant to work out that would be very, very difficult to do. But I think the direction of travel there from Kemi Badenoch is clear. She's been under a lot of pressure from that reform surge. We've seen that this week clearly in the polling, and an underlying sense that she couldn't really hold this line much longer of not coming up with policy. She said she wanted to take longer, if you remember. Not very long ago, she was saying she would take a lot longer to review what had gone wrong and have a good think about it. But I think she feels that she has to put something out there. And yes, it's really a squeeze on immigration. And it is a way of saying it's going to be a lot. You have to prove a lot more to be given that indefinite leave to remain than you did before. I mean, it's basically you'd have to have lived here for much longer. You would have had to have shown, as you point out, that you were a net benefit to the economy. It would depend, wouldn't it, what you factored in and what you factored out. But it does sound quite tough on that score. For instance, claiming any benefits, really? Any benefits for anyone around you? Okay. Or using social housing. So it's beginning to think, well, is there this ideal kind of immigrant, apart from the very wealthy, who are not going to receive any benefits while they're here? But really, it's a policy to show that she can go toe-to-toe with reform on immigration, isn't it?
I think so, but that raises a really interesting question, which is, what is the metric of success of this policy? Because, I mean, it's not going to be implementation. We're quite a long way away from that being an opportunity. The metric of success, I would venture for this policy, Anne, is whether or not it does anything for the Tories standing against reform. Of course, we had the poll out on Monday night that showed that reform now tops the Tories in voting intention. You had Kemi Badenoch herself slipping behind Nigel Farage in favourability, or less unfavourable terms. So if Kemi Badenoch is rolling out policies that are designed to attract reform voters, it seems to me completely fair enough in a week or two to see whether it has actually made any difference to the Tory standing vis-a-vis reform voters when the next few polls come out. So that actually potentially sets Kemi Badenoch up for more clashes, more difficulties in the weeks to come. Look, here she is fighting for the reform pool of voters and potentially failing if the opinion polls don't go her way. That feels like she is being dragged down into this conversation with her party about reform, and reform is just like this demon in the Conservative Party head, provoking something of a psychodrama. But does this policy announcement actually feed that issue, or does it actually help? We will see as those polls come out. Well,
yeah, I suppose from her point of view, there's a sense that she got trapped by the government's record on immigration in those huge figures of immigration that really caused her a great headache when she took over. And she's has to move one way or the other. Right? I think otherwise she's stuck defending the old record. And she said it's too high. It was too high. Everybody, I think, pretty much agrees with that, other than outright liberals on immigration, which there are now vanishingly few around, it would seem, in British politics. So I think she feels that she had to move in some direction of a squeeze. To me, the question would be, did she actually give rather too much detail? Because we've already found quite a few hicks and bits where you could sort of say, well, what do you really mean by that? But I think she wants to get into the conversation. That would be my reading.
One good thing, she's doing a broadcast pool interview. We haven't had many of those from her, so that is a win for everybody. Right, I want to change subject because we learned this morning from multiple newspapers that Jonathan Powell, who is Keir Starmer's National Security Advisor, is going to Washington this week to hold talks in part about the Chagos Islands. This is an incredible story that's taking up way too much bandwidth in British politics. And you've been hearing some interesting stuff on it. But just before we get there, it's an inordinately complicated story, and I just want to very quickly run through the basics. So the Chagos Islands are 60-odd islands in the middle of the Indian Ocean, a very long way from both Africa and India. And that's really important because their location in the middle of nowhere is really very strategically important because it allows particularly military aircraft to stop, refuel and take off. And it is British currently. But in 2019, the International Court of Justice said that actually the islands should be handed back to Mauritius, which is a country with close links to China. Now, Keir Starmer's government has been following a path set by some Tories in negotiating to hand back these islands. But he has to do a deal to protect one of those islands, Diego Garcia, which is the largest island and home to a massive US naval base. So the UK has been negotiating the lease of this base for cash against signs of objections from the Trump administration.
I'm very happy you got to do that summary, Sam, not me. So I just get to take it up where it gets interesting on the row. And there's a new character who seems to have entered British politics from very far away, Navin Ramgoolam, the newish Prime Minister of Mauritius, who was talking about the cost of the deal, which seemed to be going up, and then British sources denied.
It is hilarious, Anne. Yeah. It is hilarious that we haven't had a statement to Parliament about the costs. Yes. But we are getting statements in the Mauritian Parliament about the costs.
I know.
This is extraordinary. Tell us what we're hearing over there, because I mean, some might be annoyed that we're not hearing it over here.
Well, indeed. So what I'm about to summarise actually comes from the Mauritian Parliament. There you go. That's we've expanded the reach of this podcast. In Britain, I'm now listening to Mauritian radio all day. Britain will pay Mauritius £90 million a year, rising with inflation for 99 years to lease back Diego Garcia, which hosts the US bombers and all the serious stuff. But Mr. Ramgoolam said it would come to £18 billion. Of course, that went down very, very badly here with the government in the UK, who said that this was not the case, that was wrong. And in fairness, the Prime Minister's official spokesman in Mauritius walked it back, but said no, there was still a need to look at it. I think what's happened is the government here has got itself caught on a hook where, precisely as you suggest, because they haven't yet really come to Parliament and put forward their own figures, anything that is said somewhere else for domestic consumption in Mauritius, or frankly, maybe just a sharp Prime Minister just trying it on to see if he can get a bit more, why not, from his point of view, then that rebounds back here. Perhaps the more difficult side of this is, how is it really going down with the Trump administration? And as you pointed out, Sam, Jonathan Powell is going over there to make the case that it's good to have this deal done. It will provide stability. But we do know there have been so many noises off because there is a sense that this brings the Chagos closer to the Chinese sphere of influence. And there, the Trump administration is very touchy indeed. So Jonathan Powell, a man of many silky words and diplomatic experience in dealing with the US, but he's really got his work cut out to make the Trump world warm to this one.
I just want to understand, Anne, do you take the Chinese threats seriously? Do we take the Chinese warnings seriously that there could be some kind of compromise to national security in the event that the Mauritius government takes back control of the Chagos Islands and we have to release Diego Garcia from the Mauritius government. Is that idea that this gives China a toehold being taken seriously anywhere from what you're hearing?
Well, yes, I do think this is difficult. A lot of people, certainly, as we know around Donald Trump, are worried about that. But I also do hear from people close to, as in parts of the security services who've dealt with that part of the world, with the threat of Chinese expansion, who think that anything that is a change to where we were or rushing into this deal, as they might describe it, is good for China because it likes instability and it can lean a bit on the Mauritius government. It likes anything, if you like, that opens up questions in that part of the world. And I do know people who feel that the deal has been at least rushed. I'm not saying they would never have done it, but they feel, and we're talking about it a lot, that this sense of kind of fizziness and uncertainty is ultimately of more benefit to Beijing than it is to London or Washington.
Well, that's an absolutely fascinating insight. We've hit up against the wall. We've hit up against the timer. That's it. Thank you very much indeed, Anne. Have a lovely weekend. We'll be back on Monday for the last week before recess. I look forward to seeing you then.
See you then.
Donald Trump is heading back to the White House.
Together we can truly make America great again.
We are in for an unpredictable but fascinating 4 years.
And we're going to be following every twist and turn for the first 100 days. We'll be bringing you the latest updates and analysis first thing every morning. So join me, James Matthews.
Me, Martha Kellner.
And me, Mark Stone.
For Trump 100 every weekday at 6 a.m, wherever you get your podcasts.